Good afternoon. You are listening to Expat Radio. I'm Bill Anderson and I'm coming live from the Costa del Sol. I have to say, a rather overcast and slightly rainy Costa del Sol today. But, I live in the countryside. I've got fruit trees, oranges and apples and pears, and we've got grapes and we've got lots of different fruits. And my trees are smiling today. We get about 300 days of sunshine here on the Costa del Sol, and then we get one day of rain and everyone starts complaining. I'm not really entirely sure where they think the water comes from for through their taps or to have their shower in the morning, but I'm delighted that we've got a slightly cooler and rainy day today. I want to welcome back my guest today, Marcel Salazar from Strong for Life. Marcel, how are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you very much, and I'm enjoying the cooler weather, I have to say.
Yeah, it's a very romantic thing, Marcel, isn't it? People who live in countries with really crappy weather, sunshine, sunshine, sunshine. But when you live
Yeah,
down here all the time, it
yeah.
does get a bit tiring, doesn't it?
It gets very intense, and the thing I struggle with the most is probably the humidity. That's just
Yeah.
something that is not comfortable. So I can deal with heat, but dry heat is better for me than lots of moisture. So yeah,
Yeah, when you get some of the temperatures which have been into the 40s this summer,
yeah,
with 80% humidity, I mean, you're sort of drinking water and it's gushing out your pores
it's
and
leaking.
sweat as
Yeah,
soon as
yeah,
it's going in,
exactly.
isn't it?
I find when I'm trying to sit as still as I can and I'm still sweating, then I'm not comfortable.
No.
I'm trying to sit still, drink water, but I'm still sweating as a result. That's not my most comfortable. So yeah,
It's not. So yeah, I mean, I think I feel sorry for people who come on holiday and what they're looking for is the sun. But the thing
yeah,
is that the rain never lasts for that long. You get a couple of days of
no,
rain and,
that's it.
there's always the shopping centres and things, isn't there?
Always, and actually, it's as we've said, it's quite refreshing because you'll get maybe one maximum 2 days of rain, but everything kind of freshens up. The sea freshens
Absolutely.
up, the roads freshen up. There's more movement of water as well from the rivers and so on. So it's a really important part of it here, and actually relevant to our topic today. It can play a bit of a factor in how people feel when it's a bit wetter and damp here.
Yeah, because we
So
are
yeah,
going to talk today about
hips,
hips.
hips.
Yeah. And
Talking about
people
hips.
people do complain, don't they, in damp days that their joints are
They do.
playing up. Yeah.
They do, and it's interesting because it's almost kind of a bit of an old wives' tale. I think the kind of medical profession has tried to make it out, but interestingly, there does seem to be, and there is science behind this. There's a correlation between the the anticipation of of rain and joint perception. So it's whether they are expecting rain and then they feel more joint pain, or whether their body is actually predicting the outcome of rain is a bit of a bizarre reality, and that some people can feel like their joints are more achy, more sensitive, either just before or when it gets damp. But
Right.
whether there's actually a direct correlation is still yet to be
It's
proven.
a bit difficult. Yeah, but you have to listen to what people say too, don't you? And if when it's sort of damp and humid or cold maybe and
Yeah,
humid as you get in the UK, and if things are hurting when the weather's like that, then maybe there is some kind of connection. I'm not saying a cause and effect, but some kind of connection that's more than psychosomatic.
oh well, I've had more than one or two patients who have literally moved to this part of the world because they feel much less pain, much less limitation in movement, simply because there's more daylight, there's more sun, there's more obviously vitamin D running around your body as a result, and that has a direct effect on their physiology and their health. So I'm a huge proponent of living in a climate that's more suitable to your body, and as you say, listening to your own body is very important.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, I spent a lot of years living, working in Scotland, and you know what the weather's like up there.
Yeah,
But on top of it all, you have because it's almost an island. You've got North Sea on one side,
yeah,
and you got the Atlantic on the other. And actually, the humidity in Scotland is very, very high in
right.
general. So
Yes.
you get a wind from the Arctic with very high humidity, and I certainly feel much healthier not living in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, it makes total sense. And there is verification and validation of what we've just said about how you feel and how your body reacts when you're in a very damp, dark,
Yeah,
and cold environment as well. It's not very good for your body, and your body doesn't respond generally very well. Obviously, everyone's different, and some people are absolutely fine, or majority probably. But yeah, it's recommended if you feel that way to get into a different type of climate for sure.
yeah. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on hip problems
Hmm.
today, Marcel, and I think from the little conversations that we've had, you want to look at any preventative measures as well. Um,
Yeah. Well, first of all, what I thought to address is perhaps recognition.
okay, you go for
So
it.
yeah, if you're happy for me to talk about it,
Yeah,
because I'm currently seeing an awful lot of hips, to be fair. And as I think I mentioned this in a previous show, whereby I seem to get groupings of similar injuries all coming in at around the same time. So if it's either elbows or shoulders, then it's necks. Now, at the moment, the last month has been hips probably, and I've been
right,
working with clients who have had hip pain or more actually hip replacements.
right.
So what I do is I work with individuals who have had surgery
Mm,
and then they are looking for rehabilitation. So that's the line of work that I was trained to do right from the beginning. So I try to do as much prevention as possible if somebody presents to me before it's a serious issue. But I will also do post surgery rehabilitation, which is, of course, absolutely fundamental because it can be quite a long time. But we'll come
sure,
back to that in a little bit. So, what I wanted to mention was when to recognize you have either a degenerative hip issue
right.
or whether there's something else going on within the body that you can do to try and protect it, delay degenerative change, and things like that.
Mm,
One of the areas I want to draw attention to that's particularly relevant for a lot of people is the difference between osteoarthritis
yeah,
and rheumatoid arthritis.
okay,
Okay. So rheumatoid arthritis is still considered or is considered to be an autoimmune response to something. So this is an
okay,
autoimmune reaction within your body that results in pain, limited movement, um, reduced range of activity, lifestyle, and so on.
right.
But it's an autoimmune one. That means it's effectively happening by itself and it can happen fairly quickly. When I say fairly quickly, it can happen over a period of 6 months.
Right.
So, and that can affect almost anyone. There are actually an increasing number of uh, people whose ages are getting younger. So, what I mean by that is, generally speaking, it used to be considered something that was for maybe 50 plus,
Right.
but now the age is dropping and it's
Hmm.
dropping to 30 plus now. I think the average, the medical average is leveling out at about 30, which is very young. It's very young to have an autoimmune joint issue. And the actual cause of which is currently medically unknown. Now, there's lots of theories. It could be related to all manner of things. Inflammation is definitely one of them, whether that's, as we mentioned before, systemic because of lifestyle, medications, poor nutrition, lack of exercise, psychological even, but
Mm.
those are not yet the confirmed causes of RA or rheumatoid
Yeah,
arthritis.
you know, Marcel, every time you come on, you make me feel guilty.
Oh, crikey.
Because you always say the E word, exercise.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
I know.
but
Yeah, in that sense, I'm sorry if I'm a bit of a broken record, but
no, 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 not at all. It's just that I'm certainly very aware that I should be doing more exercise, but I'm not. But I feel it in my body. I don't have any particular problems, but I certainly feel it when I have to do something that
yeah,
I think, oh my God, I'm not fit. And
this is
and
it.
yeah,
This is it. And I mean, if the one thing that I can do by doing this show with you and by consistently recommending it is make that little habitual change whereby you think about, oh, maybe today I could try doing some exercise. Great. That would be the ideal
sure.
result because exercise covers so much and is such an essential part of our well-being,
Mm.
from health to mental, physiological health to mental health to hormonal balance to body weight. There's so many factors. But the thing that I think is probably important to share about exercise is that it should be something that you enjoy.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's how you get that connection, you know?
Yeah.
Otherwise, if I say, right, well, Bill, no choice, you're going to have to run. That's it. I want you to run 10 kilometers tomorrow. Then you try,
You
and then
would,
you hate it,
you
and you
you
hate
would need to
me.
order the ambulance at the same time, I think.
We'd have to pre-order the ambulance, exactly. At somewhere along the course, we might have to pick you up. And then it's the wrong way to go about it, right? I mean,
Sure.
that's not going to help you in any way. But if it was, let's say, I went to a golf club yesterday for a meeting, and I saw that there was a ladies' dance class. I'd never
Right.
seen it there before, but it was there were only ladies there, but they were doing like formation
Sort of,
individual dancing, and I thought that's fantastic.
was it kind of line dancing or?
It's a bit like line dancing, but it was a
Right.
bit more old school. It wasn't like
Okay.
Texas line dancing,
Uh-huh.
which would have been yeehaw with hats and everything, which would have been really good to see. This was a bit more controlled. I don't quite know what the name of it is,
Right.
but I've seen it before. But I was very impressed to see, you know, very calmly dancing along. Where there was about 6 or 7 women, and that's a form of exercise. It gets
Sure.
the heart rate up. It loads the lower limb muscles. There's coordination involved. There's, you know, all these different factors. And
Right.
if they're doing this for 30 minutes or more, that's an exercise,
Sure.
and that has an impact, definitely.
Okay, but you were talking about this sort of first area of recognition,
Yeah,
Marcel.
yeah.
So, actually acknowledging that there is maybe something not quite
There
right.
is a problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So, to come back to the rheumatoid arthritis, that's something that comes on pretty quickly, and it can affect multiple parts of your body. So, joints, any joints, fingers, elbows, shoulders, things like that, hips, definitely. And that comes on pretty quickly. So, you're going to want to deal with that fairly rapidly medically. But the more common one, the much more common one, is osteoarthritis, OA. And that is a degenerative change within your body that generally affects people over the age of 50. Now, that can be a result of perhaps too much exercise, like a
Okay.
lot of exercise. And
Right.
that is something that affects people as well. So there is always a balance. And so, in order to recognize this in relation to the hips, because obviously each joint is different, but it will present in fairly similar ways. And osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis will present in very similar ways as well.
Okay.
The distinguishing factor is time. The OA, osteoarthritis, will come on gradually, usually, fairly slowly, over a number of years, probably.
So
RA comes on faster.
what are we talking about here? Increased stiffness or increased pain
Yes,
or
yes.
right? Okay.
So if we are looking for recognition of either one of these conditions, but let's say OA, then you're going to be, for example, you will have pain in a chair. When you sit down in a chair and you're sitting there, and in particular, you're getting pain across the groin. This is very important. If you're
Right.
getting pain across the groin or the inner thigh and or the top of the thigh, that can be an indication of a hip issue.
Okay.
If you're getting pain under your bum or on the side of your thigh, that's usually something a little bit different.
Okay.
But the groin is the big sign, is the primary sign. So if you are getting pain right inside along the groin, either left or right, of course, and commonly on one side or
Right.
unilateral, means that it's OA, but it's more likely, which is osteoarthritis, if it's on both sides, then that's more indicative of RA as well. So there's the distinction, which is rheumatoid arthritis. So there's a little distinction as well. So pain in a seated position, pain in the morning, for example, on first standing up is a classic sign.
Right.
Then when you move, now those of you who are watching live, you'll be able to see with my hands because I'm on video, but difficult, but I'll try and visualize it. If you were to angle your feet inwards, which is internal rotation, and you get pain, that's an indication, more than 15 degrees. And if you were to externally rotate your feet, which is to point your toes out like a pigeon, for example, and you get pain, that's an indication of hip degeneration or change as well.
Right.
So those are the things to look out for, really, that are fundamental to sort of give you precursor. And then, of course, the level of pain is
Hmm.
an indicator. And then the progression of that, which I can go into now if you want me to, would be, of course, affecting your walking.
Right. Okay.
So if you struggle to walk for more than 30 minutes,
Hmm.
that's a precursor warning sign as well. If you're struggling to walk for more than 15 minutes, then that's really very much a warning sign for
Yeah.
sure.
And I'm sure that there, people might feel, I don't know, pains in hip. I used to, in my younger days, I used to do a lot of running,
Mm-hmm.
and it was mainly on roads. And one of the reasons I kind of got out of it was that I could feel the constant thump, thump, thump
Pounding.
affecting
Yep.
my joints.
Yep.
Sometimes my hips, sometimes I would get home and think, oh God, my
Yeah.
hips hurt.
Yeah.
Other times my knees or maybe my
Yeah.
ankles. And I did actually get to a point when I thought, no, this, I was probably then in my 40s, and thinking, if I keep this going, I'm going to have
Yeah.
serious problems.
Okay, good. I'm so pleased you brought this up. And it's interesting because actually I didn't know that you used to run.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay, what distance would you run?
I would generally have run about 10 miles.
10 miles.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good distance. That
Yeah.
is a good distance. And that is on concrete,
It was
paved
usually
roads.
on roads because I was living in cities mainly,
Yeah,
and yeah, it was mainly on roads or pavements.
brilliant. Okay, and what was the frequency of your running?
I would probably go out a couple of times a week.
A couple of times. So only 2 times a week.
Yeah, really because it was to do with work commitments. It was difficult to
Hmm.
do that during the week. So at
Hmm.
weekends, I would tend to go out maybe Saturday and Sunday. Um,
Aha.
ah,
Right, lovely. Thank you. We've just found the problem.
yes.
Awesome. That was easy. That was
Ah,
really easy. Okay, fantastic. There I was thinking, oh, he's doing this 4 or 5 times a week. He's
no,
probably overtraining.
no.
Therein lies the problem. Your frequency, you basically sandwiched it together.
Yeah,
And it's absolutely understandable that your Saturday run was probably good. And your Sunday run, your hips were like, I've just finished and recovering from this. This is way too much too soon.
sure.
Thanks very much. I'm going to give you some pain. So that would be my immediate response to why you felt that way.
Mm,
Because if you're going to do those two same distances over 2 consecutive days, it would be completely expected that after a period of time, maybe in your early 20s, that wasn't a problem, but then later in life, that's going to become a problem. Now, I wouldn't recommend that if you're in your early 20s, because it's about longevity. So what you want
right.
to do is, as I mentioned this before, recovery,
Mm,
recovery, recovery, recovery. And the problem that we have as we age, the major problem we have as we age, is our ability to recover.
right.
It's much better in youth than it is as we age, and it is hugely impacted by our lifestyle and our nutrition.
Right.
So, if you are, for example, I always draw this comparison with my patients, which is if you're a professional athlete, the way you get to that professionalism is in 3 ways. One, talent. Two, consistency. Three, your ability to recover.
Right.
And then, if I may, as an additional bonus, the support structure you have around you, which is people like me, people like psychologists. They'll never get there by themselves. They'll always get there with a support system. But the primary three are talent, consistency, and their ability to recover.
Mm,
Those people who can't recover or don't recover very well very often drop out of amateur, semi-pro, and elite level sports because they just can't. Their bodies don't let them do it.
right. Okay.
But those can be variable based on nutrition, psychology, environmental factors as well. But sometimes genetic precursors as well play a part, which is, your body inflames, you get injuries all the time, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But there are many cases of very talented, highly successful people who have had many injuries that just worked through them. There are
Right.
many professionals at top level who've been through that. All professionals have had injuries,
Yeah.
but it's the ones that recover from them that really do very well.
Yeah.
So that would be an indication of how to avoid major degeneration in your body, is to separate the time of your training, particularly if it's cardiovascular. So if you're doing a 10-mile run, that's a long time sustained cardiovascular activity.
Right.
And as you quite rightly highlighted as well, which is the concrete is much less forgiving.
Yeah.
So there is an element of that as well, but you can mix that up because you can totally run one day on grass. If you can find a decent grassy zone for you to go on, it's a far more forgiving surface, provision that it's flat and even and it's a local park or whatever. That makes a big difference to the path, for example. So there are always variables. You could mix it up. You could do a bit of treadmill running. You could mix it up once a day with a bike, those types of things. So there are lots of things you can do to stress the body, but keep the exercises variable and stay healthy at the same time without creating degeneration. Definitely.
Right. So you've been talking about, signs for recognizing that there might be a problem.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things. The first one you mentioned was about age and that you're seeing younger people coming with hip problems.
Yeah.
Is that, well, it could be a whole range of things, I guess, but is it to do with activity and the kind of activities that they're doing that perhaps, that we didn't do in the past, or?
There's a possibility. So I would say personally, I'm not seeing that many young people. What I was referencing was that the statistics for RA, which is rheumatoid arthritis, the age is dropping.
Right.
So there are more young people suffering from RA, and I wouldn't necessarily say that's happening with OA, which is the osteoarthritis. So the RA, which is an autoimmune, and now that harks into a whole different conversation when it's your autoimmune system, in a sense, your own body is working against you in relation to inflammation. There can be a multitude of factors that are causing that, anything from medication to poor nutrition to psychological, environmental factors. Any number of things can trigger that reaction, because it's, in theory, the opposite of what should be happening. Your immune system is there to protect you and to help you to recover and all that kind of stuff. But if it's not, and something has flicked the switch and it's an autoimmune, particularly in a younger person, there is some form of defect of some description, whether it's a genetic one, whether it's a chemical one, whether it's an environmental one. But that's a whole other area. I'm seeing at the moment, the patients that I see are usually degenerative wear and tear.
Right.
And they are usually 50 plus, for sure. 60 is the age that I've been working with, and women as well, actually. It's more common in women, but it definitely affects men as well.
So I'm already in my 60s, so these are the things that I have to look forward to then, Marcel, yeah?
No, you're not experiencing any hip problems. You can look forward to them, but I don't think it's going to happen to you. See, I think you were smart enough to be physically active in your youth, and that's probably going to protect you going forward.
Right. Marcel, we're going to take a short break now, and we're going to come back and get back into this topic again.
No problem.
Thanks.
You're listening to Expat Radio, your worldwide friend.
Welcome back. I'm Bill Anderson. We're coming live from the Costa del Sol with my guest today, Marcel Salazar, and we are talking all things hips, Marcel.
Yes, all things hip related.
All things hip related. Right. Okay. You were talking a lot about this, recognizing when there's a problem. What is the next bit that we move on to?
Very good. Yeah. So what I would recommend now, obviously, as a therapist and a business owner, I would definitely recommend you come and see me. Now, I think what you can do, I would always recommend that. That's always a good idea. But let's say if you weren't in a rush, perhaps, to come and see me, or if it was on the agenda, what you can start to do is look at what are your lifestyle habits. Okay. So, for example, if you're a couch surfer and you spend your life sitting on a couch, there's your first problem.
Right.
If you are a desk-based individual, somebody stuck at a desk who works in an office, and you're getting hip problems and changes, then you maybe need to consider a reevaluation of your workstation. Now, that can include standing desks. Yeah. And the ability to be in a standing position, because you may find that being in a standing position, particularly at the beginning, is not particularly comfortable because there are changes happening within your hips. But given some time, that could improve. So for an office individual, it's worth evaluating your workstation. And we've spoken about this in relation to your neck, your shoulders, your upper back, but it's also relevant for your hips and pelvis, because being in a seated position, your hips and pelvis are flexed all the time. There's no stress. There's no stress on that body in terms of making them stronger. And so they can degenerate over time simply through weakness. And so that leads me into the next thing, which is look at your physicality. If you're not a couch surfer, you're not an office worker, but you're not particularly physical, then it's probably an indication of weakness.
Right.
So are you exercising? Sorry, Bill. Are you exercising? Are you
you have to rub it in, don't you?
I think we need to tick off the amount of times I say exercise, just to sort of highlight it for you there. If I get through 10 per show, that's a good job.
That's a good day, yeah.
But when I say exercise, of course, I'm referring to, have you been for a walk this week for more than 30 minutes? And I dare say that's definitely something that you do, which is that you're walking at least 30 minutes, at least 3 times a week. And that is really an absolute minimum.
Yeah.
So, those people who are physically active in that capacity, then that would be it. Then what you can do, if you are still experiencing discomfort and it's early days, it's low level. So I always grade pain out of 10, for example, on a scale, 10 being the worst. If you're at a low level between 4 and below, then you should absolutely start evaluating what ways that you can adjust it in a controlled, measured way. So for example, exercises that work your pelvic muscles. So here we're talking about the adductors. So I would always recommend strengthening before considering major medical interventions like painkillers.
Right.
And exercising and strengthening and targeting that area really well. So what I'm talking about here are things like the adductors, which is where you squeeze your legs together.
Right.
And those muscles are called the adductor muscles. So they work along the inside of the thigh. As you can imagine, they attach directly to the area that support the pelvis and the hip. Then the opposite group of muscles that you want to do are the abductors. So those are the muscles that push anything apart. So for example, we've all seen in the gym those machines where you push your legs apart and you squeeze your legs together.
Right.
Those exercises can be recreated in a manner of ways. You can do them at home, you can do them in a pool, you can do them in a gym. It's always a good idea to get a bit of guidance if you are either at home, in the pool, or in the gym. So get somebody to show you how to do that, an instructor or a therapist or myself.
Right.
And if you do that in a controlled way, you're going to start to reinforce the structures that might be weakened and causing you a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that can help to elongate the degenerative change. Now, the other side of the coin of that would be somebody who was, let's say, a massive runner. So let's take you, for example, Bill, and let's say you had continued to run and you were running 3 times a week and you were running 20 miles a week.
Right.
Sorry, 20 miles a day. 3 times a week.
Oh, right. Okay.
That would be quite something, right? And after maybe 40 years of doing that, chances are it's
starting to hurt just thinking about it.
Yeah, right, exactly. You get that, you know what it feels like, it's going to hurt, okay? And there's a possibility, and there is a demonstration of people who do long-term running for long periods of time. Actually, it tends to affect people who do marathons, a lot of marathons.
Right.
But even then, it's incredible what the human body can handle. And if you think about the mileage, quite literally, put through the joint, it's incredible that some people can get away with that completely. Mm. But there are other people who will show of degenerative change. And what we don't know is what their nutrition like, what is their psychology like, what is their body, how does their body react to exercise? Does it inflame? All those are factors that are relevant. But let's say a person does have that. What you would then want to do is obviously the opposite. You'd want to taper down the level of activity. You'd still want to do some activity,
sure,
but you'd want to taper it down. You'd want to facilitate anti-inflammatory reactions within your body because it's an indication of inflammation and poor recovery connected, right. The two connected. And so there you'd want to evaluate, what are you putting into your body? Are you on any medications? Of course, medication always adds in a variable, as we've discussed before. which can accelerate inflammation and decelerate recovery, whether it's affecting another part of your body or an organ. So that's something to always be aware of. So when it's overtraining, then that's when we can see degenerative changes in a negative way, but we normally just want to taper down the level of activity. But we're talking about quite serious levels of activity. For most individuals, I'd say 80% of individuals who are feeling degenerative change, it's going to be a case of doing light exercises that increase blood flow, increase strength, and encourage as much healing and recovery as possible. So it wouldn't mean we'd do the exercises I said before every day. We would do them maybe 3 times a week, and we would do them with very minimal to no weight whatsoever, and to see what the reaction is over a given period, 4 to 8 weeks, something like that.
I mean, how important in general is the musculature to I don't know, to helping or protecting from these kind of problems?
So I come from the school of thought where the muscles are an absolutely fundamental part of well-being, which means that the stronger your muscles are, the better your well-being will generally be from a health standpoint. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily always translate to mental health, but again, we know that exercise affects your mental health because of endorphins, etc. But your muscles, and then for the connective tissues, ligaments, tendons, fascia, are all affected by the level of strength of your muscles. So put very simply, the stronger your muscles are, the stronger those connective tissues are.
Right.
So if we're looking at an articulation like the hip joint, which is a ball, if you imagine, if you're on video, by the way, you can imagine I'm holding up my arm and I've got a fist and my arm is bent at the wrist. This is what the femur and the hip looks like. Right. And that sits inside a socket. So my other hand is now cupping my hand, my fisted hand. And the surfaces on the top of this bone, which is called the head of the femur, is actually where the hip problem is. So some people get this quite confused. A hip degeneration is actually a problem in this part of your bone.
Okay.
It's not the pelvis, the bit that's around it. It's actually, this is what they call the hip.
Yeah.
The top or the head of the femur, which is the long bone in your thigh. And then the curved bit that sits inside the socket, that's the hip effectively. And
so it's like the sort of ball and socket idea, isn't it? And it's the ball end that
correct,
that causes the problem.
It can also be the socket.
Okay.
It can absolutely be the socket. So you're absolutely right. It's frequently it's the ball, but it can also be the socket. And what can happen is, particularly with weakness or a degenerative change, is this becomes very sticky. You've got a number of tissues, ligaments, articulate surface is what it's called, where it's designed to be slippery. They're designed to glide within each other. Okay. Right. Now, as we age, that can become sticky and gluey and become stiffer. As we weaken as well, that can also facilitate that stickiness. Mm-hmm. If we exercise in a controlled way where we're sliding the joint inside there, you actually increase the body's natural production of something called synovial fluid. Now, if you've ever heard of that before, put it in the comments or let us know. Synovial fluid is fantastic stuff, and it's our body's natural lube.
Right.
We have it all over our joints. So we get it in our shoulders. We have it even in between our fingers, but we especially have it in our knees. We have it in our hips as well. The more exercise you do, the more your body produces it.
Okay.
And so that's your body's natural lube. The less exercise you do, your body naturally says, well, we don't need that much. You're not moving it that much. So what's the point in me producing it? So that's why it holds off. And over time, you become more adhered and changing inside there. So that's why exercise is so useful. But I'm talking about things like walking. Walking is a fantastic way to exercise your hips, you know?
Okay, Marcel, you know, I hate to say this, but, you know, time goes so quickly. But we're not there yet. But I want to just you know, give a concrete example. I'm having a bit of discomfort in my hip, and I come to you. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, what I want to find out is the level of discomfort and the level of limitation.
Right.
So that's a really good question, because that is really what the mystery would be in terms of coming to me. So what I want to establish is what are the fundamentals? What are the basics? Do you have a basic general well-being? Can you walk for more than 30 minutes?
Mm.
Can you move your foot, like I was saying before? Can you invert your foot? Can you externally rotate your foot? Can you move your knee without too much limitation? So are you getting any groin pain? A big one is that groin pain when
Right.
sitting, when getting out of bed, when walking. All those are factors I'm looking for. Now, depending on the level of that, what I'm going to do is very often when those pains start to come on, the structures, the muscles around the hip joint, the buttocks, the gluteus muscles, the quadriceps, the muscles at the front of the thigh, the hamstrings, in particular the ITB as well, which is the muscle on the fascia on the outside of your thigh, will all start to tighten up to protect it.
Right. Okay.
And that can be a contributing factor to feeling limited. So what I do is I release that tissue. And very often when it's early stage degeneration, as soon as I release that tissue, the person's like, oh my God, that's so much more free. I feel
Right.
much less pain and I can do more. And that's what I would encourage, is to do more movement in controlled ways, particularly in abduction, adduction, and so on. And then strengthen and stretch the supporting muscles around the hip.
Mm.
Now, there comes a point whereby, let's say the individual presents to me with a hip that is too far gone. There is a point at which I cannot do any more to slow down that degenerative change.
Okay.
And it's important that I wanted to highlight that. Also wanted to highlight one other thing about pain location. If you have pain at the top of your hip, but it's on the outside of your hip, on my video I'm just going to show you, on the outside of your hip here, just below your hip line, that is not necessarily a hip pain. That is frequently something called a bursitis, which can happen on the outside of the thigh, which is a different thing.
Okay.
But that's more treatable and less severe, but it's a chronic issue as well. But anyway, if a person presents with severe groin pain, inability to walk for more than 10 minutes comfortably, and very limited movement inward and outward with that foot, that would be a precursor sign to the possibility of beginning to consider surgery.
Right. Okay.
There are a couple of interventions that you can do beforehand, and I'll mention them very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is magnetic resonance, which is hard to find on the coast, but there is a place that does it. If you want to know more, get in touch.
Mm-hmm.
There is magnetic resonance, which has research to say that it can work for multiple joints, not just the hips. There are some pain-killing things that you can do, but those I would not necessarily recommend. Most of you know that I'm not a huge fan of injecting painkillers, but that is a possibility as well. But it has a generally fairly low, and it's just delaying the process. And then, of course, manual therapies, which can work depending on the level of discomfort. But if pain is too severe and surgery is indicated, it will always be delayed as long as humanly possible.
Right.
So if you are an individual who's watching this and you've got severe hip pain and you want to go to the doctor will delay the intervention of surgery until absolutely necessary, which is a good thing because it is a major trauma on your body. And the ways in which they do it, I'll just briefly describe now.
Okay.
Fundamentally, they can do a number of things. And it gets a bit graphic here. So if you're a bit sensitive, obviously cover your ears or whatever. But basically, It does require literally breaking the bone of your hip. So that can involve, if we're looking at the femur and the head of the femur, what they do is they literally snap it outside of the capsule, and then they can replace anything from the top section, or at least halfway down the femur. They replace this whole section of your femur. And what they do is they replace it with titanium or other amazing materials, and they drill it down into the remaining of the bone even. And so this whole section, this head of the femur, is completely replaced and then relocated back in the hip. And that can yield some amazing results. It can be absolutely life-changing, but it's a major operation.
Yeah.
other interventions, if the structure of the head of the femur or the neck of the femur is in really good shape, what they can do is they can actually just cover and create a new articulation. An articulation is a covering over the top of the head of the femur and a new cover inside the socket as well. So inside the socket, they can make that, they can cover that, layer that with it's a metal, again, some form of titanium. And that will allow for much more fluid movement and freedom of movement whilst still retaining most of your bony material as well.
Will they be clear about which procedure is necessary before operating?
Absolutely.
They can do that with
absolutely
sort of I don't know, some kind of imaging or.
Absolutely. So they wouldn't proceed in any direction without an MRI. So MRI would tell the surgeon, right, this is quite clearly degenerated. Your bone is not really moving or structured very well. We're going to take that out. Or they would say, no, your bone is great. It's purely that articulation of your hip.
Right.
And that means we can go in, clean it off, replace it, resurface it effectively. And that's a much lesser operation with a faster recovery time. But we're still looking at around 4 weeks for something like that. Minimum. Full hip replacement can be anything up to 8 weeks as a minimum.
Right.
And that means lifestyle. Nowadays, modern surgery is great because they tend to get people up straight away.
Right.
So that means 24 to 48 hours post-surgery, they actually want you to sit. They actually want you to move the leg. They actually might even get you to stand, things like that. But it's very quick to get back up because it's very important.
Is this type of intervention primarily age-related, Marcel?
Yes. So I actually have had 2 patients recently, male patients who had hip replacements in their 30s, but one of them in particular was because of a car accident.
Right, okay.
So he had a car accident that massively affected his one side, but unfortunately it's affected the other side. So eventually he's going to need it on the other side as well. But the originally replaced hip is fantastic and feels fine. But the other one, but generally speaking, 90% of people, absolutely, it's 50 plus with OA. With osteoarthritis, it's much more likely 50 plus. And with RA, it can be anything 30 plus, but that's a different kind of medical condition.
Right.
And that's when indication can be suggested, but usually it's a last resort because lifestyle is so limited. Pain is high, sleep is poor, and the ability to walk for more than 10 minutes, it doesn't exist. Yeah. So that would be serious, severe.
I've actually referred a couple of people on to you recently, Marcel, and it was in relation to people that have had hip replacements.
Excellent.
And okay. I have to say, I've had very positive feedback from them.
Excellent.
So I guess there are 2 things here. We're into this area of radical interventions. What can people do before a hip replacement, and what could you do after a hip replacement to help things get better, frankly?
To recover. Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to prevent the necessity of an intervention because you're experiencing less hip pain or limited movement, is address it. The first thing is don't ignore it. Okay. It's very, very common, particularly with men, that we kind of go, yeah, I'll be all right, I'll get over it. And then like 6 months down the line, they're still feeling it. I've still got it. So address it, acknowledge it, accept it. And then if you don't know how to look after it, be very cautious of Googling what to do. Google is great. But Google can be dangerous.
But it's great if you know what you're looking for.
Correct.
The problem is when you Google it and you don't know what you're looking for.
That's right.
You could end up in lots of strange places with it.
You absolutely can. I mean, I've had people coming to me saying, I Googled it, and it turns out I may have a third leg. And I was like, yeah, well, that's probably not what it is, but let's check anyway. That's not what it was. It could be anything from, an abduction of some description. Yeah, anything could happen on Google. It's very exciting, but it's not necessarily very accurate. So get it looked at, get clarification, first of all. If you're going to go to your doctor, make sure the doctor's confident with musculoskeletal things.
Okay.
Doctors are very used to prescription, so their first port of call is painkillers, right?
Right.
So it's easy, it's cheap, it's quite fast, but it's not necessarily effective or a solution.
Right.
So always be a little bit wary of that. But if you want to go to your doctor first, that's up to you. But try and go to somebody who actually deals with muscles on a regular basis, and in particular joints and articulations, etc., because it's their job.
Right.
So then what you want to do is consider, as I mentioned before, as a form of prevention, are you exercising enough? Are you overweight? If you're overweight, that plays a big factor in osteoarthritis, for sure. That puts a lot of pressure through your hips and back. So consider weight and consider your nutrition, and that will obviously affect your whole life as well.
Yeah.
Stretch and strength. So I think I've covered this before in previous chats, but stretching and strengthening will basically reinforce your hips as much as you possibly can. If you think of it like this, the origin of all movement comes from the core of our body, which is effectively our hips and pelvis.
Right.
Then the more flexible and the stronger they are, generally our ability to move will be much better.
Okay.
So whatever it takes to do that, whether it be swimming, Pilates, yoga, running, jogging, walking as a minimum, martial arts, fantastic. All of those things are going to play a big part. And, you know, there's a huge spectrum there. So there's a lot of choices that you can choose from as a form of prevention. When it comes to supplementation, which I believe in, you want to be taking good, natural anti-inflammatories and joint facilitators, which are omegas. So glucosamine is worth considering. Omega mixes, particularly ones that don't come from fish, because we find there's a lot of heavy metals in fish omega oils, unless you can find one that is particularly good and you know that it's not containing that. Again, I work with a brand that's excellent in that regard. And then things like curcumin as well, that's becoming incredibly popular as it's showing that it's very good natural anti-inflammatory, not specific for joints, but natural anti-inflammatory. So glucosamine and omegas are particularly good. And then we know that vitamin D is very important. So in the winter months, vitamin D can be extremely useful as well. So if you don't go in the sun, or if you're not particularly active, or if you cover yourself up a lot, even when the sun is out, vitamin D supplementation is a really, really good way to prevent onset of degenerative change.
Marcel?
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, my friend, but the time it's gone.
Oh, are you kidding me? I'll just respond to what happens if somebody has surgery. If somebody has surgery, what you've got to do is I've got to rehabilitate them to become stronger, more balanced, and return to their normal life. That's the goal, okay? As safely and as rapidly as possible. That's what I do when I work with post-surgery rehab.
Marcel,
sorry, I talked too long.
It is a pleasure to have you with me, as always. And I hope maybe you'll come back again at the end of next month and we'll pick a new topic.
Oh, we'll be doing it. I'll be here.
That would be great. Marcel, thank you so much. It's been very interesting, as always. You have a lovely weekend. And to everyone who's listening, I hope you have a lovely weekend. Thanks for listening in. And we're going to go out with, because we don't have it here in the Costa del Sol today, with Electric Light Orchestra, Mr. Blue Sky.
Bye-bye.
Bye.